Julia.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okie dokie. I'm going to stop the screen share now. So that, and I'm going to try and see. Oh dear, I don't know. Ah, there you go. That gives me more of a thing. So I'm going to give it 1 more minute, but I can see everybody who's coming in, and so I can add anybody on that's later, that comes in later.
By the way, my internet is a bit dodgy, so if I suddenly freeze, that's why.
Yeah, that's fine. I've been anyone who's been doing this at work, this is the kind of nature of the work call at the moment, is suddenly people just going a bit funny and spotty in the middle of it. Okay. All right, I'm going to kick off then, and if anybody, hello Colin, you can see your face now. You're very welcome to keep your face. Okay, so if you could mute your mics who aren't speaking, and Julia and I will be speaking, and then I've put chat up. Oops, chat is up. So if you haven't used Zoom meetings before, chat is on the bottom of your screen, and if you have a question you can put it at the side, and because it's quite a small group we can take questions as we go. But I'm going to kick off. I had up on the screen Julia's array of books. Julia has written for Avon Books from between 2017 and 2016, and in that time did a stonking 10 books, which is 10 books in a decade, which I still am in awe that you did that, Julia, given how slowly I write. So one of the things I want to kick off with is that's a real achievement to have managed that, but I also know that you did that raising 4 daughters and also caring for your mother-in-law Rosemary. So how did you do it?
Well, I'm not very disciplined, shall we say. I just kind of write as and when. I used to just fit it in as and when. It was easier once the children went to school, and I didn't go out to work then, so I was freelancing as well as writing. And also having deadlines, just kind of, you have to get on with it. Looking back, I'm a bit surprised I did it, but if I couldn't have done it, like now I work 4 days a week. There's certainly no way I could have produced that level of books at the time if I'd been working as well. But it sort of helped with the kids that went to school. I tried to write, but then I used to find I'd be very productive at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they were coming home at 3.
Yeah.
So that was a bit frustrating. So yeah, it was hard, but
yeah,
do what you do, don't you?
And just to sort of say, in that time we started off with Pastors New, which was your first novel, which told the story of a grieving widow coming to a new community, and then you had I think it was Strictly Love, wasn't it, which was set around the dance floor. And then the Last Christmas trilogy, which is set in a fictional Hope Christmas, which it's very much based on where our mother used to live in Church Stretton and our sister now lives, isn't it? So I don't know if you, before we move on to kind of questions for the current, is there anything you want to say, like, are any of those books, do you have a particular favourite, or are they all kind of?
I think I absolutely love the Hope Christmas books because they're very much part of my heart. As Ginny said, it was inspired by Church Stretton, the setting of Hope Christmas, and it was very much, I had a character who was like me with 4 children, and she was very much based on me in terms of the chaos of my life. And she had a blog where it looked like she was running this sort of, she was a mum, I can't remember what the blog was called now, but it was a sort of perfect, family life thing. And actually the reality was her life was chaos, because I was, at the time, I remember being very frustrated by a lot of domestic goddess things that were around, and it was like, actually the reality is horrible. Not horrible, but it's just not like this. So that's kind of very close to my heart. And interestingly enough, I had in Church Stretton, there's a little row of cottages, which are ones, the pink, white and yellow. And I like them so much, I put them in one of the first books. I had a character living in them. And now my sister lives there, which was quite a sort of weird thing later on. And the last book came out when my mum was dying, and it featured a lot of walks that we used to go on. There's a lovely bit on the Long Mynd where there's some wood statues, wood carvings, and we used to take the children there all the time. And I had my characters going there, and it was actually very comforting to write it at a time that was quite upsetting. So I kind of, I remember feeling great love when I was writing that bit. But my favourite book probably is my last but one book, which is Make a Christmas Wish, where I had this character who came into my head years and years before I wrote her. And she was actually quite a dysfunctional character. She was an alcoholic and she was very destructive. And I sort of channeled Blithe Spirit and Christmas Carol, and she's a ghost basically. And the story is told about she wakes up, she gets knocked over just before Christmas, and then she's got the opportunity to put right some of the things she's done wrong. And I just had such a blast writing that. Especially I had a scene set with, I had several scenes set with seances, and I had all these ghosts causing mayhem in a seance, which was quite funny. So yeah, that's my favourite probably.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think that's one of my favourites as well, and I have a lot of warmth for the last Christmas books for the same reasons you do. But I think what I liked about Make a Christmas Wish is, you know, it starts off with this woman being so mad she's just been knocked down in a car park and she's stuck in this car park for a year as a ghost and she can't get away. And I just loved that. I thought it was a really great. It was a really great opening, and it's a really great premise, and I love the journeys those characters go on. So that was your last book, was in 2016, and it was It's a Wonderful Life. It's been a while since you've done something. So what have you been up to in the last 4 years that we haven't seen?
Well, it's been a bit more of a hiatus than I was kind of anticipating, but I had got to a point where I wanted to write a little bit more than just Christmas, and because I was writing for Avon and they're very commercial, I was a bit niche. I'd become a bit niche Christmas for them, and I kind of had run out of things to write about Christmas, quite frankly. So I wanted to do some other things. So it just seemed like a good time to sort of take stock and have a bit of a breather. And also the trouble with writing, as you say, like, you know, when you're writing for a commercial company, you have to produce quickly and often. So it is quite pressure to have that year deadline. So it's been quite nice not having that. But it's taken a little bit longer than I thought, because I then ended up having an operation a couple of years ago, and that just knocked me out for a year, and I didn't really write. And it also, I was working 3 days a week, and then I upped it to 4 days a week. So that's given me less time as well. But it's been quite productive. So I've actually got one manuscript finished, which is a story. It's very different from my normal things, but it's a story that was inspired by something I read in the paper about a woman who knocked over and killed another woman's toddler. And I thought, oh my God, what a horrible situation. So that's the setup, that there's one woman who's on the way to hospital. Her dad's dying and she's in a bit of a hurry. She's had one glass of wine. She was drinking wine, but she hasn't finished it. And she gets a call from the hospital. So she leaps in the car. She's probably driving too fast, but then there's an oil spill on the road as she comes around the corner, and she loses control of the car and she kills this toddler. And it's horrible. I mean, I can see Anne's face. It is really, really sad. It's very, very sad, and it's quite dark. But what I wanted to explore was the idea of revenge and anger leading to resolution and forgiveness. So it's actually the two strands of the story are the mother of the toddler, who, when it goes to court, the woman who knocks the daughter down she gets community sentences because it is an accident, so she doesn't go to jail. And the mother of the toddler is so distraught and so angry, she starts a civil campaign, and she's going online and raising crowdfunding for it. And then it all gets a bit out of hand, and trolls take control, and the driver is a black woman. So it gets really nasty, and there's lots of racist stuff going on, which the other mother doesn't know about. And then it all comes out. The mother of the child is a single mum, and her ex-partner is an absolute waste of space. And then he's behind a lot of the trolling, and then she gets rid of him. And then he comes out with and tells everybody that actually she'd let go of the little girl's hand. So then all the trolls turn on her. And then it's all about how the two women kind of find a way to make peace with each other, really. So it's
yeah, I've read that one, and I can tell you it's a great book, and had me weeping by the end. So
that's that. And then I'm writing a thriller at the moment about two teenage girls who end up in a very toxic relationship, where they're sort of competing for thank you, Anne. Where they're competing for, one of them is from a very poor, uneducated family. The other girl is from a very rich, educated family, and they end up swapping lives in a way. I'm about halfway through it, so it's got quite long to go, but I'm enjoying writing that because it's something very different from anything I've done before. And then I've also, based on quite a lot of experiences I've had and a lot of my friends, I'm planning a story which is much more my usual kind of thing, called The M Word, which is about the menopause, and it's about 3 women and how they cope with the menopause, and I'm hoping it's going to be funny but a bit of emotional stuff as well. And it's going to be quite graphic and like things that really happen rather than the sort of sweet lovely things you see on the news. And then the final thing I'm working on is another, it's more my background, is very much based on something like, again, the genesis of it was something that happened to me when I was in labour with my first child. I had this very weird experience with a complete stranger where we were induced together, and we had a night in we were on the maternity ward, kind of cheering each other up as one of us went up and one of us went down, and it was the most intense experience of my life. And then we left, well, after we'd had the babies, we never saw each other again, which is great. I don't even remember what she was called, but I would have loved to have met her and stayed in contact with her, but we just left in a hurry and never did. So I've taken that as my starting point, and 2 friends, and again, they're very, very different. They become friends, and their daughters become best friends. And as the children are growing up, the difference between their kind of parenting style becomes marked, particularly when they're teenagers. And one is more relaxed than the other. And it's going to get to a situation where the one who's less relaxed has ends up falling out with her daughter, and her daughter will go and move in with the other woman. And with the situation that we're in, I suddenly thought, if they're in lockdown, she can't come home. So I'm just so pleased I found a way to use lockdown in fiction, because it's like, I think everyone I know is worrying about that at the moment. It's like, how do we deal with this? Because you can't not acknowledge it if you're writing contemporary fiction. So
yeah,
sorry,
great.
Was there a question there?
There's a question from Helen which says, it sounds like you're working on more than one project at a time. Can you write more than one, or are they all at different stages?
They're all at different stages. I think I've got 4 chapters of the Friends one. I've got 10 chapters of the menopause one, but I'm going to do a massive rethink on that, because I wanted to talk to my ex-editor about it, and we've had a long conversation, so I'm sort of reframing it. I'd actually paused that deliberately because I wanted to wait for her. And then with the thriller one, I think I'm about 50,000 words in, and I'm at a point where I can leave it because I'm about to start like the final part of it. So I'm going to go back to the menopause book, rejig that, get that hopefully to a state where I can send it to my agent, and fingers crossed I can get that a new publisher for that, and then I'll go back and finish the thriller. I mean, this week's been great because I've had a week off, but it is quite difficult now because I edit 4 days a week, so that takes up a lot of my creative space.
And I know I'm a bit biased, but I have read all these drafts of all of these, and they're all great. So they all need to get out there. So that'll be sorted soon. Anne says, I was going to ask you about the role of your agent and editor as you work on all the books.
Right. Well, my agent is very good, and Ollie Munson of AM Heath, and he's very involved. So I send him ideas, and he comes back with feedback on what he thinks will work. And he's been planning a strategic way of doing things. So we might, because there are 2 now different strands to my writing, we might go for 2 different publishers, the different strands. I'm really, really hoping that the editor that I've been talking to edited me at Avon, and I've had quite a lot of editors, but there was just something special about the relationship I had with her, so I absolutely would love to work with her again. So that's what I'm hoping to do. But so she's been a bit naughty because we had a long conversation, and I said, what would you want me to do? She went, I want you to go away and think about it and come back to me, because she wants me to, she wants it to come from me. But we had interesting chats about how the direction it could take. But when it gets to, if I'm lucky enough and she does take it on, she will give me lots and lots of feedback, and she's very detailed and she's critical in a good way. And I always absolutely know that she makes a much better book. Make a Christmas Wish was the best book I've written, I think, partly because she edited it.
Lovely, thank you. So that moves on nicely. Thank you for telling us about what you're working on, because they're all really, as I say, really interesting and great projects. how do you decide what ideas to follow? Because I know you're like me, you come up with lots of ideas, and it's which ones, because you know, to actually invest in a book you have to kind of make a commitment. So how do you decide to make that commitment to your writing?
I think very wise advice from Virginia's editor, Kate, who I also work with, and she also edited me in the past. I was talking to her at Christmas about all of this, and she said, which is the one that's burning you up and you have to write it? And at the time it was a thriller one, which is why I've done it. And I knew I had space to do, you know, 2 or 3 years ago I might not have had the space to pursue it, but right now I do. So I thought that was actually very good advice. So that I would always say, yes, follow where your heart is and what you want to write the most. But actually, I know once I get back into all the others, that will be my, you know, it's where my heart is where what I'm writing at the moment usually.
Yeah. Great. Colin's got a great question. A lot of your books have strong relationships in them. How easy and difficult do you find it to write descriptions of relationships building or failing?
Oh, I love it. I don't know how easy it is, but I worry sometimes that it doesn't feel real. I want the relationships to feel realistic, and that sometimes is tricky. So I tend to try to layer them, because I take often, particularly with characters as well, this sort of feeds into character, but I kind of don't think, if you think about your own life and think about you as a person, how many strands everybody has, you know. So I'm a writer, I'm an editor, I'm more into the arts than sciences, but I'm fascinated by physics, although I don't understand it. I love gardening, I love cooking, I run, I swim. You know, it sounds like I don't do all of those things at all the same time. It sounds like but I've got all these different strands of things that I'm interested in, and I think that's the sort of key to it, is like having strands of your characters. And when you're in a relationship situation, there's obviously the things that bring the characters together, but there's also things that will pull them apart, and often that's different things. So, you know, you might have a couple where, say, actually, I'll use my own example. Actually, me and my husband, if we have a problem, I'm a bit like a dog with a bone and I want to sort it out, whereas he tends to like to go away and mull on things, and he doesn't always appreciate me sort of saying, come on, we need to sort this out. And equally, he'll get fixated on something in the house that needs doing, and, you know, he's cross with me because I'm not thinking about that, whereas I'm just thinking, yeah, but we haven't hoovered the floors, you know. So it's that sort of thing. I didn't think, trying to think, you have to sort of really understand your characters and what makes them tick and what will cause them tensions. But it's tricky. Interestingly, I work at Mills and Boon, and one of the things I found really, really helpful editing Mills and Boon is the focus is very much on the emotional conflicts of each of the characters, and it's really about getting the depth of that right, and that I found has really fed into my own writing, and I think made it better. So yeah, I find that interesting.
That's a great question and a really good answer. You've obviously told us about 4 of your writing projects, and they're all, as I say, sound really great. So what challenges are you facing with, you don't have to say this about all the projects, but what are the challenges? Because I know sometimes you're really into an idea, and then you just come boom up against a problem you didn't anticipate. Have you got anything like that going on?
I think at the moment with the thriller that I'm writing, one character's storyline is easier because she's got more dynamic stuff going on, and the other character is less. She's less. It's difficult to say without actually giving stuff away, but my poorer character has ended up going to college, going to Cambridge, and the rich character has lost everything. She's screwed up her A-levels. She's doing a BTEC at college, and she will come out of that. But I'm struggling. There's more structure, I think, for Becky's character than there is for Daisy, and I'm alternating the viewpoints. So I find the bits that I'm writing for Becky much easier than the bits I'm writing for Daisy. The other thing I have, there will be a court case scene in it eventually, and there was actually in the book about the two women with the accident, and I keep meaning to go. Well, I can't do it now, but keep meaning to go to actually watch a court case happening, because my knowledge of court cases is very TV based, and I think we all know that they don't always get that right. So I feel that sometimes my research is an area that I really struggle with, because I don't often have time to do it. and it's easy to sort of write a glib scene and then kind of go, actually, really, is that true? I mean, luckily I have a few lawyers I know, so I'm asking them, and also my daughter did a law degree last year, so she's been really great. Actually, she was very good. She studied criminology, so she's been very helpful in telling me what actually happens and how it works. So.
Great, thank you. And of course, now in lockdown, you could actually do, I think they're doing some courts like this.
So, yes, actually, that would actually be a good point. Yes, I should probably watch them, shouldn't I?
Yeah, it won't be quite.
I was really disappointed because actually one of my daughters was called up for jury service in May, and she was living with us, and it was in Kingston, but now she's moved to London, so she swapped it, and it's the Old Bailey, and I was like, oh my God, I could have come and been and watched you being in the jury, but of course that's not happening. I don't know, she might be doing it, I'm not sure what's happening, but we won't be able to watch. But.
Okay, and what are you enjoying about the projects you're working on?
Well, the thriller, I'm really enjoying the fact that it's very different. It's quite psychological, and I'm finding things out about my characters all the time, and particularly Daisy's character, who's very dysfunctional and becoming increasingly more dysfunctional. I'm layering and layering things on with her parents, and there was a sort of, I just started off with her having just very dysfunctional parents, and I hadn't really given them a reason why they were so dysfunctional, and then I found a reason a few weeks ago, and it was like, yes, we're a light bulb moment, and I'm very excited about it because now I kind of feel that really was going to, I hope, give an impetus to what happens at the end and really build up the tension, if I get it right, which is obviously the worry that you don't.
Yeah. Sorry, Helen, you're just dropping in and out. It's the internet for some people. Yeah, this just happens. As part of the tensions of Zoom, I'm afraid. So what about characters? I mean, you've sort of said you've got some. Sounds like you've got some really interesting characters. So are there any you particularly like, and are there any you particularly dislike?
In any of them?
In any of them, again.
I really like both my protagonists in Damages, which is the one about the women with the
I like
accident,
them
because I feel they both suffer in different ways, and I think particularly I thought it was really interesting. You know, I think another area I wanted to explore was the idea that we all have to blame somebody, and it's always got to be somebody's fault, and sometimes things just rubbish and they're not anybody's fault. And while Kathy was reckless on the night of the accident, she never meant to kill anyone, and the trauma for her of that happening, because she's a mother herself, is quite marked. And then obviously for Millie, who lost the child, that's just a real heartbreaking situation, and she hasn't got much support around her. So I like both of them, and I like the journeys they went on. I am really, really enjoying writing Daisy because she's a bit of a psychopath, and I've never done that before. And also Becky's character is going on a very interesting journey, and she's turning into somebody that she didn't set out, you know, she didn't start off to be. And then I've got a key character is Daisy's father, Daisy hates her parents so much she doesn't call them mum and dad, so she always refers to her dad as the prof, because he's a lecturer at university, and her mum is Marilyn, and the mum is an absolute cow. And the dad seems very nice, but he's got quite a lot of dark secrets, and I'm actually enjoying kind of uncovering, you know, because Becky has one view of him and Daisy has a completely different one, and Daisy's always warning her against the prof, but Becky can't see it, and that sort of tangle, I'm enjoying writing that, really. So
lovely. And so Helen's just come up with a question on character, and then I've got one more question, and then we might have a couple of more minutes, and then we'll be needing to wrap up. So you said your last Christmas book, you had the character first. Is that how it usually happens? Are characters looking for a story, or does the story often come first?
Oh, good question. Bit of both, probably. Sometimes it's a situation. So like I say, with the Damages one, it was just seeing that story about the you know, the accident I saw. I think with the one I'm writing now, God, I can't even remember where that came from, actually. It just sort of came. And obviously the one set in the hospital bed, that was just based on the experience, and the characters came from that. Yeah, so it's a bit of both, really, which is a bit of a rubbish answer, probably.
So my last question for you was something I read in the press just in the last week. I think it was an article in the Guardian, and it was about writers having characters in their heads, and I think it was like an astonishingly high number of writers, 61%, I think, of writers can hear the voices of their characters in their heads talking to them. And the paper was very clear to say that, you know, this was an act of an imagination. It's not kind of really hearing voices, but I was just really interested in that as a writer myself. Does that happen to you? Can you actually hear your characters' voices in your head?
I'm not sure I can hear the voices. They definitely live in my head. I have a head full of people. I thought this was normal, actually, until I once had a conversation with our mum and Dave, my husband, and I said, oh, you know, I have, you know, all these people in my head. And they looked at me like I was completely mad, and I thought, oh, okay, maybe that's just not that normal. It's just normal for writers. Livy, the character in Make a Christmas Wish, definitely jumped into my head and was walking around and being really stroppy and difficult right from what, and I wanted to write her for so long before I actually got the chance to do it. But I'm not sure I can hear their voices, but I can see them, and I can I'm not sure it's hearing, but I know they're having conversations, so, which is probably pretty bonkers, but you know, there you go.
No, I mean, I think it was kind of that was quite a common response from people that were being interviewed in the article. So yeah, thank you. And Anne's got a great question here. How do you deal personally with going to darker, sadder areas? Do you think you could have written them when your children were younger and you were caring for Rosemary?
I don't think I could have written the children thing when I was younger. No, I think it would have been too upsetting. But I think I wrote all three Hope Christmas books were written in the background. First, my mother-in-law being very ill and poorly, and then my mum. And I definitely drew from what was going on, you know, in my own life then. And I think, yeah, it's difficult. It can be very difficult sometimes, but sometimes it can be a bit liberating as well, because it's like tapping into that sadness and that you know, that pain, and actually finding a useful purpose for it. I find it quite cathartic, actually. But I think, yeah, I don't think when having a toddler, I don't think I could have written about one. And, you know, if I ever get grandchildren, I probably wouldn't revisit it either. You know, that kind of, you know, slightly, don't want to try, you know, jinx things or something.
Great. We've probably got time for one more question if anybody's got a burning question. Type it in the chat below if you've got one. Okay, so I just want to say thank you, Julie. I don't know if there's anything else you just wanted to say wrapping up.
Not especially. Thank you for everybody for coming along and asking such interesting questions. I mean, I think I'm very lucky. Oh, that's a good question. How come there are two writers in the family? Well, we're quite a literary family, basically. My dad was an English teacher, and I think he would have loved to have been a writer himself. We have our grandmother wrote, I think.
Yeah, I discovered
who wrote poetry.
I discovered when we were doing Mother's House, I came across, we knew our father had written poetry, and he tried some children's novels that were very funny, but never quite finished them. And I discovered a whole load of papers which had J. Moffat on them, and I thought they were my father's because they had, because that was his initial. But as I started reading them, I thought this isn't his writing, and I discovered it was our grandmother, who in her 70s had gone to a writing class and had just written all these short stories in the beginning of a novel, and she obviously never quite got around to doing it. So we think, you know, the genetics has come through. Yeah. But it's a whole other conversation, I think. But I think it's in the genes, yes, Helen. But also I think there's a whole other conversation about what you need in your life in order to be able to write. And our grandmother never had a chance. She was a single mum through the war years, had, you know, working as a teacher, didn't have a chance to go to university because her father wouldn't let her. So she had all the things stacked against her that nowadays are still stacked against writers from poorer backgrounds. And our father didn't get a chance to go to university because of the war, then became a teacher, then got married, had lots of children, had never had the time. And I think it's taken our generation, we only did it in our late 40s and 50s, but the next generation, they're kind of doing it because they've had the kind of the permission to do it, really. So that's a whole other conversation, I think.
Yes.
But thank you very much, Julia, for that. I think that was really great. Thank you for everyone who's attended. Just a reminder that this has been recorded, and so by signing up you agreed to be recorded, and we will be sharing it. The other thing to sort of say is there are events going on all day, so please follow the Discover Authors Facebook page, and it's Authors Discover on Twitter. Do share about this event, do check in on other events. We're going to have in quarter of an hour, or just over quarter of an hour, at 10:05, Ali Thurm talking about her debut novel, One Scheme of Happiness, which is a really interesting, very, very interesting dynamic between three school friends who meet up in later life, and the power struggles and relationships between them. And yeah, it's a very interesting, quite dark, but quite funny as well, novel. So do join us at 10:05 for that if you can, and do share the message on social media. And also, the last thing to say is which I will be saying at every event, is please support your local bookshops, and not even your local bookshops, other indie bookshops. Lots of them are struggling in lockdown, and they are all working overtime getting online ordering. And if you follow at Indie Bookshops UK, they've got it pinned to their page on Twitter, the bookshops that you can order books from. So please, just buying one book a day from, well, not even a day, you can't all do it one a day, but one book a week from a bookshop will help it keep going. So thank you. See you at the next one.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
So you can leave the meeting, I will end it.